Good in Erev Yontif. It's Erev Rosh Hashanah. Today we are learning Perek Vav of Demai. Thank you for coming along. Today's share is sponsored Lila Nishmas Aaron Nachman Ben Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai Ben Shepsel, Baruch Asar Shmuel Leib, Ben Moshe Ben Yosef, Ben Hashemas Havin Aliyah, and the first name Adasar Bas Leib, Asok Shar Choli Yisrael. And today's learning will also be a host for God's Klai, so we should be zochet to a Gezeres Tovos and to a Ksiva Chasimet Tova and a Shana Tova Umasuka and being Baruchtis being Gashmis for everyone, for everyone. And may be zochet to greet the Mashiach Sekinu from Him Yemenu in the coming year. Okay, Mishnah Aleph starts off. Amakabel Sadam Yisrael min Ovi Kuchavim min Akusi Yichalik with Nehem. We're talking about a sharecropper here. Sharecropper or a tenant farmer. Tenant farm. What that means is that someone owns the field, and someone owns the field, and someone else will work in the field, and they're basically renting out the field. It's like you have a normal. It's in the case of a normal store, right? Someone owns the property, and a tenant is renting it out. So they do that for farms too, where you have an owner of the field, and you have a tenant, you have a renter who's renting the field, and or a sharecropper who gets paid from the produce that he harvests. It's like a commission regarding the field. So so we start off with someone who receives a field as a sharecropper from a Jew or from an idolater or from a kusi. He can divide the produce in front of them, meaning he gives the landowners his share of the crop without. He does that before separating Truma and Ma'aser from it. Why? Because Chazal were lenient with the sharecroppers to ensure that Eretz Yisrael would remain cultivated. If you made it too difficult, then they wouldn't be interested in planting and working the fields. Hachoker Shadim Yisrael. However, someone who rents a field as a tenant farmer from a Jew, Torah Menosim. So he must separate Truma from the crop first, and only then give the landowner his share. He is not, however, required to separate any of the other mice before giving the landowner his share. So it is Truma first, and the landowner, and then all the other mice afterwards. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Hey, Messiah, when do we say that a tenant farmer does not need to separate the other maestros? When he gives the landowner his share from the produce of the same field that he rented and from the same species that they agreed to plant. The same field and the same species. But if you gave him from his share from the produce with different field, or you mean acher, or from a different species, even though it's on the same field, but if there's a change in the variation from what they originally agreed upon, ma'aser v'nosilo, then you must separate all the ma'asers first, the truma and the maestros, and then give the landowner his share. It's only when the landowner only goes before the maestros when they plant on the agreed upon field with the agreed upon species. Other than that, he doesn't. Mishnah Beis, hachocher sada b'ovikol. Someone who rents a field as a tenant farmer from an idolater, he must first separate all the maestros and then give the landowner his share. The Chachamim put a penalty on him in order to discourage people from renting land in Eretz Yisrael from idolaters. And therefore, they pressured the idolaters to sell the land to the Jews. Therefore, they're going to be more machmir over here than in the previous case. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ah, Hamakalo stay on Mosa bin Kochavim," is someone who receives his ancestors' field, and all the Shvatim had had Chalakim Eretz Yisrael that took assigned to them by the time of Yeshua when they went to the land. So everyone has a piece of land that belongs to their ancestors. So someone, but at some point in time, maybe during the Churban, the field wound up, transitioning to the property of a of a of, of an idolater, um, and so now this guy is getting his ancestors' field back from the idolater. So he's renting the field that originally belonged to his family, but was stolen by the Kochav. What's the rule over there? Meiser knows the. So he must separate all the Meisers and only then give the landowner his share. Trumas Meisers come first, again, because it's in order to encourage him to buy back his family's field and not to continue this wrongful practice. Mishnah Gimel, Kohen v'Levi shekiblu sadem Yisrael. If a Kohen or a Levi received the field as a sharecropper from Yisrael landowner, Kishem shecholkim b'chulin kach cholkim b'truma. So just as the law is, just as a sharecropper and landowner divide the crops to limb, so too do they divide the crops truma and ma'aser. Meaning that when the landowner takes his percentage of the crop, included in that is the truma and ma'aser that must be separated from it. So the landowner then separates these ma'asers himself and gives them to the Kohen and Levi of his choice. He does not have the Kohen or Levi, who are the actual sharecroppers. They have no special right to the truma and ma'aser of that field. But Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. Af ha-ma'aser shelahem. He says the ma'asers also belong to the sharecroppers. Therefore, the Kohen or Levi get the truma or ma'aser from the entire crop. Shamanas came by because it was on this condition that they came to lease the field. So they're getting the added benefits. So that's why they came. They agreed to this transaction. Therefore, it rightfully belongs to them. Mishnah Daled, Yisrael shetiba mekoin v'levi. So now you have the opposite. The opposite case. You have a Yisrael who received a field as a sharecropper from the Kohen or Levi. The Kohen Levi is the owner of the owners, and the Yisrael is the worker. And Ma'aser is the Bala. So the Ma'aser belongs to the landowner because it's assumed that he meant to keep for himself the right to take that. Therefore, the landowner is a Kohen. Then all the truma goes to him. And if he was a Levi, then all the Ma'aser goes to him. Right. Now, if the Kohen is the owner, then he gets the truma, and then the sharecropper can divide, and then one more time. If the landowner is a Kohen, he gets all the truma, and the rest of the produce is divided between the landowner, the Kohen, and the sharecropper, the Yisrael, who can, and they each give the Levi their share of the Meiser, and they split that. So the Kohen can only take the Truma, and Levi can only take the Meiser, and everything else gets split between the two of them to distribute by themselves. Rabbi Yishmael says, Hakatani Shekibo Sadem Yerushalmi. If a villager receives a field as a sharecropper from a Jerusalemite, someone who lives in Yerushalayim, People who live in Yerushalayim and they own fields out throughout Eretz Yisrael. So Ma'aser Sheni Shayushami. So the Ma'aser Sheni belongs to the person living in Yerushalayim. Since he's living there, he wants the villager to bring up the Ma'aser Sheni to him, to his home, and he can eat it there. The Chachamim say, Yachulhu Hakartani Lalas Lachul Yerushalayim. The villager himself is able to go up to eat the Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Since he can travel to Yerushalayim at any time, there's no reason to assume that he gives up his share of Ma'aser Sheni. Therefore, the Ma'aser Sheni too is divided between the landowner and the sharecropper. That's according to Rabbi Yishmael. Mishnah Hey, Hamakabel Zaysun Shemen. So now someone receives an olive trees as a sharecropper. I remember we spoke in Pei. We spoke about the special status of olive trees. If someone receives olive trees as a sharecropper to produce oil, he receives trees that are full of oil, that are full of olives under a sharecropping agreement. That that the agreement requires him to pick the olives, press them to oil, and then divide the oil with the owner. So the same way that they divide the chulin, they also divide the truma. Meaning that it doesn't matter if the sharecropper is Yisrael leasing from Kohen Levi, or Kohen Levi leasing from Yisrael. Either way, they share the truma, or might suggest that they share the rest of the oil. That's according to the Tanakh. Yehuda Omer, Yehuda says Yisrael Shekiva Mekohen Milevi Zeis and the Shemen. If Yisrael accepts the olive trees as a sharecropper from a Kohen or Levi to produce oil from them, the machzis schar, or where he partners with a Kohen or Levi to sell his oil for half the profits, ha'maishes above them. All the mice belong to the owner. Right? So all the trees and mice belong to the Kohen or Levi who own the trees. That's Mishnah Hey. Mishnah Vav. Beishamai only lo yimkar adam as zeisav ela l'chaver. A person should not sell. He may not sell his olives except to a chaver. Chaver, someone who's very machmir in the laws of tumah and tahara. Because if they're sold to someone who's not a chaver, then they're going to become tamei when he starts to make the oil from them, and you can't cause tumah. You can't cause tevel to become tamei. Beis Hillel says after meiser, that person can sell his olives even to someone who's careful about meiser, he's not a chaver. He's a neman. He's one step lower than a chaver, because we said that there's an aris and there's a neman and there's a chaver. Chaver is machmir on tumah tahara, and a neman is machmir on hafrashas meiser. Because since the olives are still dry at the time he sells them, and they can't become tamei because they can only be only certain liquids become tamei, and the dry ones do not. And oil is one of the 7 liquids that can make something tamei. However, the modest ones of Beis Hillel, those who were extremely careful about keeping mitzvahs, they conducted themselves according to the opinion of Beis Shammai in this matter, and that sold their olives only to Chaver. See this? Obviously, everyone from Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai were considered sneas because they were the leaders of the generation. But here, there were some from Beis Hillel who were more machmir, and they kept like Beis Shammai regarding this halacha. Mishnah Zayin, moving right along. Okay, 15 minutes in. We're gonna try to keep the half an hour. We're halfway through the Perek. Baruch Hashem. Shnayim shebatzu es karmeim l'soch kas echas. If 2 partners picked the grapes from their vineyards and placed them into a single wine press, Echad Meiser, Echad She'eino Meiser. And one of the partners that was Mafresh Meiser, he's very careful, he's a Naman to do that. Well, the other partner is not Mafresh Meiser, he's an Amaretz. Meiser, Meiser, Eshelo. One who is Mafresh Meiser must meiser his half of the wine as definite tevel. And additionally, he must meiser half of his partner's share of the wine, wherever it is. Therefore, he's giving meiser on 3/4 of the wine. Because you have half of his and half of his partner. Somehow that adds up to 3/4. I don't think you're sure. Anyways, moving right along. Mishnah Ches. Okay. Mishnah Ches. Shnaim shekiblu sada berisis. Osh yashu, osh nishtatu. Okay, two people received a field together in a sharecropping arrangement. They're partners in the sharecropping. Osh yashu, or they inherited the field together. Osh nishtatu, or they became partners in the field. They bought a field together, and one of them is machmir about Meiser, the other one is an Amaretz. Yachahu Lomar. When it comes to dividing the produce, the one who's careful about Meiser may say, Tol ata chita shemakum pluni v'ani chita shemakum pluni. You take the wheat that is in this place over here, and I'm going to take the wheat that's in this place over there, different part of the field. I'm going or you take wine that is in that side of the field, that place, and I'm going to take wine that is in this place. So since each partner takes his share of the produce from different part of the field, they are not considered to be selling their shares to each other, which should be forbidden. Rather, they're only taking what belongs to them. Therefore, the partner who is careful to mafresh meiser does not need to separate for his other partner, only for his own. I will but he cannot say to him, you take the wheat and I take the barley. You take the wine, I'll take the oil. Because when they each agree to different type of produce, then that's considered to be a sale, and that is forbidden to sell tevel. Can't do that. Mishnah Tes. Chavev am haaretz yeshu esavihem am haaretz. So, if two brothers, one is a chaver and one is an am haaretz, they inherited property from their father who was an am haaretz. When they come to divide the inheritance, the chaver may say to his brother, like the am haaretz, Tol ata chitim shemakom ploni, ani chitim shemakom ploni. You take the wheat that is in such and such a place in the field, and I will take the wheat that is in such and such a place in a different field. You're going to take over here, and I'm going to take over there. You take the one that's over here, I'm going to take the one that's over there. As we learned previously, the last mission. But you cannot say to him, you take the wheat, and I take the barley. Or you take the wet produce, which might be tame, and I will take the dry produce, which is for sure tame. As you learned previously, exchanging two different types is considered to be a sale, and you can't do that. So that's irrelevant whether it's that's the test is excuse me. Mishnah Tes is very similar to Mishnah Ches. Okay, moving right along. Mishnah Yud. Ger v'ovei kochavim sheyoshu esaviyim v'ovei kochavim. So, we're not allowed to have. It's us to have any benefit from idol from a vodah zara, uh, any benefit whatsoever. So if you exchange an idol for money or some other object, then that money or item becomes usher as well. And that applies to wine, and that applies to everything. So if a ger, if someone converts to Judaism and an idolater, meaning one of his brothers or his biological brothers or his biological father or whatever, inherited the property of the father who was an idolater. Yachol Lomar. So when they come to split the Yerusha, the convert can say to his brother, Tol ata vani maus, you take the idols, and I'll take the money. Ata yain vani piros, or you take the nesech wine, that's the usher wine, and I will take the permissible produce, which is mutter. Um, because even though in a regular situation, the items that are received in exchange for idols or what is others that they're normally usher. In this case, the money a person received by the convert is exchanged for his share of the idols, and that's permitted. Um, so since a convert does not inherit his non-Jewish father under biblical law, he doesn't really own a share of the idols of wine. Therefore, um, his receiving them is not really considered to be an exchange. Being bothered with however, once the idols of Nesafine have come into the convert's physical possession, therefore he legally owns them, also then it's forbidden for him to exchange them for money or produce, and if he does, they are forbidden to benefit. I remember when we first moved into this house many years ago, we bought it from a non-Jewish owner, and there were a couple of statues around the house. I took a hammer and I bashed them. It was so much fun. Like, how how often do you have a chance to destroy a statue in what is ours? So they're like some cherubs, like angelic figurines. I took a hammer, whack. But anyways, um, let's continue here. Mishnah Yud Aleph, two more to go. Amocher Peres Syria. New topic here. Nama Aretz who sells produce in Syria. Syria was in the lands of Aram, and it was conquered and annexed to Israel by David HaMelech. In some ways, Syria is treated like Eretz Israel, in other words, it's treated like Chutz La'aretz. The produce that's grown in Jewish-owned land in Syria is subject to Truma and Meiser under their abundance. So now we're going to talk about how Demai applies with it. Melech Peres in Syria, someone if an Amari sells produce in Syria, Omar Mishal Eretz Yisrael, and he says they're from Eretz Yisrael. Chayav La'aser, the buyer is obligated to take Meiser. There's produce, there's even the produce from Eretz Yisrael, but it goes to the Eretz, you still have to be marfish too much Meisers. Move sorry to him. But if the Amar says that the produce has already been meisered, now on he's believed Shapesh Aser who Apesh hit them. Because the same mouth that prohibited it is the same mouth that permitted it. Another example over here, and that's that since he said he brought it from Eretz Yisrael, then he can also which make it also until he was mafish meiser. Then he could also be believed to say that it was really meisered, and um, and now it's permitted. So another example, Mishtalihain, that the Amarit says that the produce is from my own field here in Syria, Chaylaser, and the buyer is obligated to take meiser on it, because produce grown in Syria is also subject to Demai. It was known to grow there. Musar on him, if he says the produce has already been meisered, Naaman, we believe him. Why? The same thing. It's the same mouth that prohibited it originally, saying that it came from his field, is the same amount that permits it when it's saying that it was already been meiser. However, if it was known that the seller has at least one field in Syria, then the buyer's is required to mafresh the meiser of Demai, even if the seller did not say it came from his field. Since we know he owns a field in Syria, you must assume that the produce is coming from his own field, and therefore it's subject to Demai without him saying so. And finally, Mishnah Gebeis, and we'll wrap it up for today. Am haaretz shama lechaver. If an Amar said to a chaver who was on his way to the shuk, Kach li akudas yorek, buy for me a bundle of vegetables. Kach li gliskan echad. Buy for me a fine loaf of bread. Keach stam upater. And the chaver may buy 2 bundles of loaves of the mai without specifying which one is for himself, which one is for the Amaretz, and he is exempt from meisering the one he gives to the Amaretz. When he later gives the Amaretz is assumed to be the one he bought for him. Since he never belongs to the chaver, he's not under no obligation to meiser before giving it to the Amaretz. Right? But if the chaver at the time of the purchase said, "This is for me," and that's for my friend, then it's arvu then became mixed up. He doesn't know which one is which. Then the chaver is obligated to give meiser not on all the bundles, both the bundles. Now, if you hey meya, then you may do this even if there's where as many as 100 bundles that he bought for the Amaretz, and only a single bundle for himself, even though it's 100 to 1. Even though it's outnumbered 200 to 1, he has to give he has to give meiser for one of those 100 before giving them to the Amaretz. Okay, that's the end of Perek Vav. Tomorrow, Wednesday, it was Rosh Hashanah, so there will not be any shir. We'll pick it up with Perek Zion on Thursday. So Have a Kasir Tova and a Gigabest Shur.